Hello, everybody. I'm Stuart Broadley, CEO of the EIC. I am delighted to welcome you to our first C-level EIC podcast, which we call EIC Clearly. See what we did there? EIC Clearly. I'm delighted to have with us for our first podcast Campbell Keir, who's our esteemed guest today. He's also honorary president of EIC. Welcome, Campbell.
Thank you, Stuart. It's great to be here for the first of these podcasts. I really look forward to seeing what impact they have with our C-suite members. I hope this is part of a journey that we all go through in the next few years.
Oh, Campbell, we couldn't think of anybody better than you to start off the process because you've had such an interesting and diverse career and, of course, latterly now helping us. But maybe before we get into the subject at hand for today's EIC Clearly podcast, which is Trump 2.0, tell us a bit about you and kind of how did it all start for you and how you got to where you are today?
Well, Stuart, it started at university. My professor told me about a company called Schlumberger that might be hiring. And I applied, was flown to Paris, did some interviews, and then I got the job and was next time in Iran working for the oil service company Schlumberger. But after 2 years of doing that, I went and did my master's because I wanted to be on the other end of the data collection, the data receipt. And I got a job with Shell. And for 30 years, I've been running around the world, being a technical person, petroleum engineer, and gradually moving up the chain, so to speak, to become senior executive, general manager, CEO. So I've worked in many countries around the world, including Malaysia, Abu Dhabi, Kazakhstan, and traveled to many countries. So it's been a great job. Then I was seconded to the British government to the Department of International Trade, where I worked for 4 years. I worked alongside civil servants, helping promote exports and inward investment.
How did you get that gig, moving from Shell into DIT? Not many people get that invite.
No, there was somebody in Shell who does international relations, a guy called John Crocker, and he has very close contact with the British government. And he said, hey, we've got this guy who's becoming available. Would you like him to go into the government and help you with trade and investment? And so they said yes. And I went and met somebody in the civil service. And the person I met was Sue Gray, because she was then head of ethics and compliance. And she wanted to know how I'd manage potential conflicts between still being an employee of Shell and working for the government. So that was an interesting first meeting, and she was very, very helpful. So yes, it was just the government and Shell and other companies, I think, liked doing at that time senior swaps to help spread the knowledge.
Oil and gas then was still seen as central to government policy.
Yes, I came in, Stuart, as the head of oil and gas, and within 12 months I changed that to be renewables, and we started a renewables section that grew, and now it's mainly renewables, I think, and we started with offshore wind, but we expanded, we had nuclear and other forms of renewables. So it was a very interesting time to be able to change the dynamic, and as the industry grew and as the agenda with climate change changed as well. So it was very interesting. And then when I left after 4 years, I went and did some consultancy work. And one of the things I did was work with you to help you with the journey that EIC is going through and helping its members go through that journey. And I'm very pleased to do that. So thank you for that opportunity. And it's great to be able to help out where I can.
Yeah, and we're lucky to work with you. And in fact, it's when I first met you in your DIT job, which I guess is now a DBD name, but those DIT days were fun. So thank you for your help back then. But now I need your help as we get into the topic of the discussion today, which is Trump 2.0. And to reassure people listening in, we're not going to give any kind of views one way or another about what you think, because we know a lot of people have views on the new president. That's not really what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is for all the business leaders out there who are trying to now work out what does Trump 2.0 mean to them. Wherever they are in the world, of course, we're doing this recording here in our London EIC office, but in the end, I think companies all over the world are now working out or trying to work out what it means to them. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What I think was a pretty inspirational and successful campaign, Make America Great Again. Again, not really getting into the messaging itself, but, it worked, didn't it? That campaign worked. What does that talk to in terms of the campaign itself and what it might mean, again, to others thinking about how they learn how to run a good campaign?
It's a really interesting question, Stuart, and I think I'll start with the 101 executive orders. And somebody described it, I think, from the Wall Street Journal as rather elaborate press releases. So when we look at the success of the new president, what surprises me is not so much that he won, but that he so quickly taken action. It was day one, day two, he was signing all these executive orders and actually right on the front foot. So whoever...
It's like he learned from last time how important it is to make a fast start.
And knowing from the civil service how things get prepared, somebody has written that page and a half of executive order that had to go through presumably some process and some consultation.
And also done that the signing of those executive orders done in such a public, press-friendly way. It was also interesting as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I'll pick up on why was he successful. He is, President Trump, the ultimate political showman. He's all about showing what he is about and what he wants to do and then delivering it. And I think the reason why he was successful is he hit a nerve, or he hit nerves in the American public. And I would say that one of them is the pocketbook. Americans like to talk about the pocketbook, which I think in English is the wallet. And overall, that seems to matter to Americans a lot, their ability to spend money, support their family, etc. But I think he also touched a nerve on immigration, which is linked to jobs, which is linked to offshoring of work, deindustrialization of the heartlands of America. And I think he also hit a nerve in terms of an anti-agenda. And it's
What do you mean by an anti-agenda?
It's an anti-government, anti-woke, anti-China kind of theme that he runs through all of his policies. And somehow...
So stopping things, not just starting things.
But also, from his view, and it obviously resonates with some of the American public enough to win the election, it resonates with the American public, and they want to see that those topics addressed and action taken. And I think one of the lessons that I think politicians may want to learn is he is an action president. He takes action. You may not agree with what he's doing, but he signs orders, he makes a lot of noise, he gets stuff done. And so I think that's what many people in the United States seem to want. They were fed up with the consensus politics that prevailed in the United States. Maybe you see that elsewhere. You see Austria, Spain, people pushing back very hard
to the right.
on the move to the right. So yes, I think he touched a nerve with Americans, but I think the pocketbook and the anti-immigration jobs kind of thing is probably, for what I hear and read, the most important for people.
That's kind of interesting. Policymakers, but also leaders, I think this idea of touching a nerve, if your role is to make a difference, then what's the nerve that you can touch which wakes everybody up? And yet actually ultimately is what a lot of people are thinking, but maybe they're not willing to say it.
Yeah, and I think he's rich enough or powerful enough or outspoken enough not to worry about the consensus and causing ruffled feathers. He just has an objective in mind and he wants to get to that objective, and this is the way he does it. Now, these executive orders have to go through agencies and organizations to deliver. A lot of this stuff seems to get delivered through the state organizations rather than federal organizations, because we all forget that the United States has a federal structure, which we don't have to the same extent. So it'll be very interesting to see how these things actually get delivered. But my guess is if he thinks he can get half of it done, he'll probably count it as a success, and maybe the American people will think so. So
let's talk about what he might regard as one of his early wins, which is what we all hope is a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. I mean, as again, thinking about the kind of the leadership aspects of that, that's what you could argue even before he was in the seat as president-elect, he was having influence there. And the idea of peace in the Middle East, of course, is something that would be good. So, I mean, how are you reading that?
I think we all have to be very careful what we say about the Middle East and what we say about the peace deal. Of course, the peace deal is extremely welcome. And when you look at the pictures of Gaza, it's just a demolition site. So I really hope that phases 1 and 2 deliver on their promises of releasing people and starting the humanitarian aid flowing. Whether it will lead to long-lasting peace, I really don't know, because there's so many vested interests in the region, and it's so complicated. I've worked and visited there many times. It's a very complicated area, and the problem in Gaza, Lebanon, etc., has been going on for decades. The one thing I do think is that the problem has to be solved by the people themselves who are there on the ground. I think the West can help, the Gulf states can help, but unless they get consensus and they move forward, I don't think it can really be a sustainable peace process. And I do worry about who's paying for this infrastructure reconstruction. I would hope that the Gulf states with their wealth will contribute significantly to that. But will they do so unless there's an end state they can see? Because if we go back through the same cycle again of terrorism and destruction, etc. But I just do hope that there's at least some respite for the poor people on both sides of the equation. It's been a very sad period. My son said to me, you know, Dad, we're living through history on this one, together with the Russia-Ukraine problem or war.
And we know, don't we, though, that a peaceful world obviously is a better world, but it also has a tangible outcome for trade. Because when you have, conflict, of course, then trade breaks down between nations, many nations, those directly involved and many that are indirectly involved, and that then slows everything down. It's bad for the economy, of course, but it's also bad for net zero. And maybe let's move then into the Trump administration's impact on the world's energy sector and also climate matters. So what's your view on how he's approached that? And again, if you're a business leader listening into this, how do you balance what you might in your heart believe, which is wanting to do the right thing for the world, but also having responsibility to your business? And now it's not so clear, is it, about the world's view of net zero?
Well, it's drill, baby, drill, isn't it, Stuart? That's the catchphrase and the liquid gold. So it's remarkable what he's done, but it is what he said he was going to do.
He did it last time too.
Yes, and then Biden undid it again. So we'll have to see how long it lasts.
I was at an offshore wind conference just last week where a major investor into the US energy infrastructure was talking a little bit about this and saying that they're so invested they now will just have to wait 4 years for what their view was, then it'll then flip-flop back again.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what actually happens, because we have to face it, in the UK, we get a lot of our energy from overseas. We get a lot of gas from Norway, Qatar, and the United States. We get a lot of oil from the United States. So we're not independent of what's happening in the United States, because gas and oil prices play globally. So if he does manage to get higher production in the States and globally, then oil prices will come down, which can only help economies to grow. But if it does lower the cost of energy in the States, that will give them an industrial premium over other European countries. But I do worry that what he has done in removing the subsidies and tax relief from renewable project is going to slow down the transition. And I think the latest figures from the United Nations say we're heading for 2.9 degrees C rise in average by the end of the century, which isn't good news. And we see it in the storms and the weather that we're having. So I can see why he's doing it, because I think he's doing it to lower the cost of energy in the United States. Whether it will actually happen or not, you probably know a bit better than me about the state of the offshore wind industry, and maybe the shale producers who've been through a very rough time recently perhaps will be a bit hesitant in case of a flip-flop, as you mentioned. What do you think?
Well, certainly you have to follow the money. That's what all the data that we have shows that. And it's interesting also to see that in the US, they're saying drill, baby, drill to have the lowest possible cost of energy. And in other countries like the UK, we have to go to renewable, says the policymakers, to get the lowest possible cost of energy. So maybe it's different countries and their different access to natural resources that has the biggest impact. Maybe it's the starting position of their tax infrastructure and where their costs already are as to what they think is possible and the right thing to do. But what the data says is the money's moving into oil and gas and into large nuclear globally and not moving into offshore wind or hydrogen or carbon capture. And it kind of looks like it's slowing down. And that is before Trump 2.0. This is because the cost of these projects is not going to be borne by developers anymore. They're going to push these costs and extra risks up to the developers and, if you like, the investors into new green infrastructure projects. Those investors and developers will not take that risk anymore. They then look to subsidies for the government to help them do it. The governments don't have the money to subsidize it anymore.
And consumers don't want to pay. And you can see that in electric vehicles. I know this from my own circumstances at home, that people don't want to pay the extra premium that electric vehicles cost these days. And people are pushing back on some of the higher cost of energy. So there may be a bit of a reset in the UK and throughout Europe in terms of progressing the green agenda, which I think will be very unfortunate because people, again, it may not be called the pocketbook in Europe, but certainly people are worried about the cost of living. And the way it's going at the moment, it's pushing costs up, not down.
But to be clear, this was happening before Trump 2.0.
Yes.
But okay, he's maybe putting even more focus on the issue of lowest possible cost and what does that mean to you as a business, to a family and to a government.
Yeah, and focusing very much on the US industry. He wants to revitalize US industry. So that's why he's talking about using some old tax law, a global agreement on tax, that if you don't pay the right tax, we'll add that tax in the United States. Now, I don't know the details of that, so I'm not talking with any confidence on that. But clearly, it's a much more inward-looking approach. And I think if you look back 10 years or a bit longer, if I look back at the old Shell scenarios, it was an outward-looking process and it was all about trading with each other. The US has certainly moved inward, and it's all about the US. And you can see that whether it's foreign policy.
Have you seen that trend of inward domestic policy trumping? I don't mean to use that. That's a joke.
Yeah.
It wasn't a joke. It was just bad use of the term. But do you see that countries now are looking domestically for different reasons over energy security and over economic strength? They're doing it for other reasons? Or do you think the US approach, which is, make their country great again, is happening everywhere? Or should it be happening everywhere?
Isn't that what happened in the UK with Brexit? Isn't it? We didn't call it make Britain better again or bigger again or whatever, but there was that spirit of the Dunkirk spirit, and that's why people
That was our populist moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, Brexit. We wanted to take back control of our borders and immigration, etc. So we kind of was a precursor to what Donald Trump is doing, and he's perhaps the same kind of spokesman as then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So I think, yes, I see it in the UK, and you can see it in Austria, you can see it elsewhere in Europe. There is a tendency to look at what matters for us in our country and less than the bigger picture.
So what does that mean for a business, though? If you're a business looking at international trade as an option for growth, or maybe you have established markets and you're thinking, I need to establish new markets, the government's tending to look more domestically rather than internationally in the way they spend their time and in their messaging. So how do you balance that as a business where you're saying, well, the policymakers are not saying what I want to do because I believe in international growth?
It's going to be a hard time for business. I think back when we had last chat, was it at the AGM, Stuart? Yeah. We said 2025 will be a challenging year. I think 2025 and 2026 will be challenging.
Why challenging?
Because I think it's going to be uncertain. Certainly the impact of the United States, whether it's tariffs or taxes, whether you can employ your staff in the United States, at attractive rates, etc., is going to have knock-on effects around the world. So
for us, it's a bit like another Brexit moment. When we did Brexit as UK, we cut off the opportunity for the low-cost, rapid access markets and supply chain and labour force.
I mean,
Feels like the same as what the US are doing, not constitutionally, but through policy and through tariff, they're closing themselves off a bit.
well, what President Trump seems to be saying is we want investors to come, but you have to do it on our terms. It's kind of like local content. You have to make the stuff in the United States. You have to employ United States citizens, and you have to pay your correct taxes. Don't go offsetting your taxes through other vehicles. And if you don't do it our way, we are going to punish you for that. So I think if it goes the way he might want it to go, the United States might be a very attractive place to invest, whether it's drill, baby drill, or AI, or other advanced technologies, etc. It may not be offshore wind, but it may be many other things. So we may see investors going into the United States, but it'll have to be on the terms that President Trump has laid out, as I've just said. So that may just take investment away from Europe. Of course, if it doesn't go well and it's punitive, then maybe investors will stay away. So I think it's very early to say, Stuart, what it's going to look like. But if I was running a business, I'd be looking at my cash flow, making sure I had a strong cash flow, I had a good order book, I had a diversified portfolio. I wouldn't be jumping in or out of the United States yet, but I'd try and make sure whether it's a sector or geographical basis, I had a good, solid portfolio of activities. And that's easy to say for me, sitting here looking out at the Palace of Westminster on a sunny day. But if you're running a real business, it's much more difficult. And people skills is still going to be one of the top agendas we have in terms of business. Everyone says we're short of people.
But everybody also says that they have a lot of suppliers in China and increasingly customers in China, even though there's, the sentiment coming out of the Trump camp is increasingly mixed around China. There was a talk of tariffs. Now they seem to be softening at the moment. So what's your view on US and China and the impact on the rest of the world?
I just think China is too big to ignore, and its industrial base is getting ever more sophisticated, isn't it? A good example is my mother-in-law has a pacemaker, and she goes every year to have her pacemaker checked. Well, this time she's come back home and she's got a home monitor, and the home monitor checks her heart at home and sends signals off to the hospital. The device is made in China. And it's very well made from what I can see. And so the days when you might get suspect products from China may still be around. You still have to be careful, of course. But I think whether it's Europe or the United States, I think it's hard to ignore the billion people or so that are in China, their manufacturing base, and the technology that they are obviously have developed or have imported by whatever means. So I just think that in 4 years, you can't turn around an economy and turn on the supply chain, the industrial base to compete with China that quickly. And China is still moving, isn't it? It's still developing and changing.
Mm. And Europe seems, from what commentators are saying, to be losing the competitiveness war against the US and China. And again, as a business leader in Europe, how do you approach that then in terms of, okay, I'm getting less competitive, that's what I'm reading in the papers, but they're probably feeling it as well, probably not winning as much as they used to, or their margins are dropping. They can't get access to low-cost supply chains like they used to because of all these local content trends around the world. Does that mean it's time to look at reducing commitment in Europe and expanding? Does it mean it's time to just lower expectations for growth? It doesn't sound very positive, does it? We're looking for a strategy to grow here.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge. People are going to gravitate to the lowest cost base, aren't they? And I think the political leaders are going to have to look at that. What is the cost of doing business in your country and for the Europeans throughout the EU? Maybe you're right. It's going to be a nice to have, some of these policies, in terms of if you want to compete globally, unless you become more and more isolated and inward-looking, which I think would be wrong. I don't like that idea.
So, as we start to wrap up, then I've got 2 questions left. One is about UK, and one is about business generally. UK, here we are, as you say, sitting in Vauxhall, overlooking the MI6 building, but not too closely, I promise. And that, the UK has a close relationship, of course, with the US. special relationship. And at the moment, there seems to be warm words between the Prime Minister and the President. Do you think that's going to continue? Are you feeling like that's more important, less important? And again, what's the impact of the US to the UK right now?
I certainly think that we have commonality with the United States on many areas in terms of defense, in terms of politics, etc.
One of the things that's really important, of course, is the historically strong relationship between the UK and the US.
I suspect the United States has several special relationships, not just with the UK. Ours may be a bit more unique than others, but the United States must have a special relationship with Canada and Mexico as its partners. But certainly we share many common things, a wish for freedom of speech, a wish for democracy, and we share a lot of global objectives. And I think that's a very fundamental level. It's not just one president or one administration. It's probably quite a fundamental cooperation between our two countries, because I think we are quite joined to each other. But I don't think that will stop President Trump from putting tariffs on the UK if that's what he wants to do, and if he thinks that's in US interests. I doubt he'll do that. We hopefully, with our new ambassador and our relationship, perhaps when he makes a visit here and meets the royal family and His Majesty the King, we can maintain that cordial relationship, and that doesn't turn into anything like taxes or tariffs or anything like that. But I think the UK government's going to have its work cut out in making sure that punitive tariffs don't apply. But I do think that if President Trump achieved what he wants to do, the United States may be a growth opportunity for UK business. It will be different from how it was. We'll have to be more present in the United States. And it is a big market for us, as are other markets. If I was a British business and I was doing business in the States, yes, I may have to change the way I do business a bit, but I think it's still there. And the opportunity to do business should still exist with the United States. Whether we call it a special relationship or not, I don't know. I'm sure he has special relationships with all sorts of other countries.
So to wrap up, if you were running a business right now and you had engagements already and investments ready in the US, is now a time to take advantage of that and to push harder? Or is now a time to just pause, take a breath and invest elsewhere? How would you advise business leaders right now, of which many listening into this will already be active in the US, to balance their risk and their opportunity right now?
The first thing I do, Stuart, is I call up my friends at EIC and use their consultancy service to take some advice.
Good answer.
And it's reasonably priced, isn't it?
Yeah, bargain.
Yeah, bargain.
Probably too cheap, so I need to work on that.
I would be going ahead. I would be taking some advice from experts on tax and that kind of thing. If the business opportunity makes sense, I would be going ahead with it. I might be a bit cautious if I was in one of the areas that he's targeted, like renewables. Perhaps we wouldn't, as you said, be investing in offshore wind farms or onshore wind farms. But certainly drill, baby, drill. Maybe we should be investing in drilling rigs or something. But so it depends which business sector you're in. I think if you're in the service sector or you're in the culture sector, I think you would be going ahead, wouldn't you? But certainly some of the areas like the renewables, you'd probably be more cautious. But until otherwise told, I would continue with investment. But I'd also be looking elsewhere as well. As you know, and we do at many of our events, again, a plug for our events team, there are opportunities around the world, and having a diverse portfolio of export opportunities clearly is a strength for those companies that do it, and it makes them more resilient to changes. But it's not an easy thing to do.
So US market is very important, very dynamic, and it sounds like there's a general view that Trump wants to go fast and have an impact. The MAGA campaign is literal. It means make America great again. It does mean put America first. So that's something that everybody can see, but maybe they're still not sure what it means. Well, I think every decision will always put that first. You can see that in the briefing that all of the department heads are getting now as they're all being appointed. But that's something everybody should be aware of. And once we get used to that, maybe it'll feel like, okay, we can start to work and invest in that area afresh. But it also sounds like words of caution as well, just to wait and see how it settles down. Would you agree with that? Overall, on balance, just give it a bit of time, and once we understand how this is going to play out, then it's a great market? Or
Yeah, take a bit of time, but don't hold back. I think if you're in the right area, continuing to invest in the United States probably makes business sense.
Thank you very much, Campbell.
You're welcome.
I hope everybody has enjoyed listening in to this first EIC Clearly C-Level podcast. It's been a delight to speak to Campbell, a good friend to EIC, and of course very knowledgeable globally. So thank you for you. If you're listening in and you've enjoyed this, there'll be more of these to come. So thank you very much.